All right, let's get right into it. For a very long time, we were pretty much told that our brains were set in stone once we became adults. But what if that's just not true? What if you could literally, physically rewire the very organ that makes you, well, you? Today, we are going to unpack the incredible science of neuroplasticity. And this wasn't some fringe idea. This was the dominant scientific belief for decades. The thinking was, after a certain point in your childhood, your brain's structure was pretty much locked in. That was it. You had the brain you were going to have for the rest of your life. And it kind of makes sense. It feels intuitive, but it turns out it couldn't be more wrong. So what was the bombshell that blew this old belief out of the water? Well, the evidence came from a really unexpected place: the chaotic, sprawling streets of London and the people who have to navigate them entirely from memory. We're talking about the legendary London taxi driver test. Now, to become a licensed London cabbie, you have to pass what is probably one of the hardest memory tests on Earth. It's famously called the knowledge. And this isn't about memorizing a few main roads. We are talking about committing a labyrinth of 25,000 streets and thousands of landmarks to memory. It's just a massive cognitive feat that takes, on average, 3 to 4 years of intense, full-time study. And this is where it gets really cool. Back in 2000, a neuroscientist named Eleanor Maguire and her team scanned the brains of these drivers, and they found something absolutely astonishing. The posterior hippocampus, that's a part of your brain that's critical for spatial memory, it was physically bigger in the taxi drivers. Their brains had literally changed shape to handle the insane demands of their job. So that incredible discovery naturally leads to the big question: how does this even happen? How can your brain just change its own structure? Well, the answer is a fundamental property of the brain called neuroplasticity, and it all boils down to one simple, incredibly powerful rule. Okay, so what this really means is that neuroplasticity isn't some rare, special event. It's the brain's default setting. Your brain is constantly adapting, remodeling, and reorganizing itself based on everything you do, think, and experience. It's not fixed hardware. It's more like living, dynamic software that's getting updated all the time. This is the mantra of neuroplasticity. You gotta remember this phrase. It comes from a concept called Hebbian learning, and it's the core mechanism of how this all works. See, every single time you have a thought or perform an action, a specific chain of neurons fires off. If you repeat that thought or action, those same neurons fire together again, and the connection between them gets stronger, faster, and more efficient. So here's a great way to think about it. Picture your brain as a dense, snowy forest. The first time you try to learn a new skill, say a new chord on the guitar, it's like trudging through deep snow. It's hard work, it's slow. But if you walk that same path again tomorrow, it's a little easier. And if you do it every day for a month, you stamp down a clear, easy-to-walk path. That's your brain automating a skill. Meanwhile, the old paths you stop using, the snow covers them up. It is literally a use-it-or-lose-it system. But here's the catch, and it is a really big one. This amazing, incredible mechanism for learning, well, it has a dark side. The process of rewiring itself is completely neutral. It doesn't care if the habit you're building is good for you or bad for you. The exact same process that helps you learn a new language is the very same one that wires in destructive patterns. So when you repeatedly worry and ruminate on anxious thoughts, you're not just feeling anxious, you are physically strengthening the anxiety circuits in your brain. When you mindlessly scroll through your phone for hours, you're reinforcing the pathways for distraction. Plasticity doesn't judge. It just builds whatever path you walk down. At the end of the day, your brain is just an efficiency machine. It wants to save energy, so it automates whatever you do most often. And it really doesn't distinguish between good habits and bad habits. It just paves the roads you travel most frequently. And this completely changes how you should think about your daily actions, right? It's not just about changing your behavior. It's about consciously, intentionally sculpting your own brain. Every single time you choose to focus, you cast a vote for a more focused brain. Every time you give in to that urge to get distracted, you're casting a vote for a more distracted one. Okay, so if we are the architects of our own brains, how do we build a better one on purpose? Well, the good news is that neuroscience gives us a pretty clear set of instructions. So let's open up the toolkit for directing your own neuroplasticity. The first rule, and maybe the most important, is that real change requires a challenge. If what you're practicing feels easy, you're probably just cruising along on old existing pathways. True rewiring only happens when you push yourself right to the edge of your current abilities. So, what does this look like? Well, instead of just passively rereading your notes, close the book and force yourself to actively recall the information from scratch. Instead of playing that part of the song you've already mastered, you need to practice the part that always trips you up. That sweet spot of difficulty is the signal your brain needs to say, hey, we need to build some stronger connections here. Okay, this next one is totally non-negotiable. You can do all the difficult practice you want, but the real construction work, the part where those new pathways are made permanent, that all happens while you're asleep. Honestly, pulling an all-nighter is one of the worst things you can do for learning. You're literally robbing your brain of the time it needs to save the work you just did. Think about it. Learning requires both practice and rest. If you skip the rest, you just wasted all that practice. Your attention is basically the gatekeeper of plasticity. Your brain strengthens the connections related to whatever you were paying attention to. It's that simple. So if your attention is divided, the signal for change is weak, it's noisy, and not much happens. Trying to study while your phone is buzzing and a TV show is on in the background, it is unbelievably inefficient. I'm telling you, a solid 30-minute session of deep, uninterrupted focus will build stronger neural pathways than 2 hours of distracted stop-and-start effort. The quality of your attention matters way more than the quantity of your time. And finally, get up and move your body. Exercise boosts a protein called BDNF, and you can basically think of it as fertilizer for your neurons. It helps them grow. The result is just incredible. Studies show regular aerobic exercise didn't just slow down age-related decline in the hippocampus, it actually reversed it by 1 to 2 years. So when we put all of this together, what's the new operating manual for our brains? It's a huge shift from seeing our minds as these fixed things we're stuck with to seeing them as something we are actively creating every single day. This is it. This is the single most important takeaway. Your daily habits, the patterns of your thoughts, where you choose to put your focus, they are not just things you do. They're the things that you become. You are constantly and quite literally building your brain with every single action you take. This is both incredibly empowering and, a little bit scary. You are not stuck with the brain you have, but you are responsible for the brain you're creating. So the question is no longer if your brain will change, it's going to. The only question is, how will you choose to direct that change? What will you build next?